It's been years now since the Me Too movement swept through Hollywood, bringing long overdue consequences for harassers and abusers in media and entertainment. But there are still plenty of people and entire industries in need of that kind of scrutiny, including the overwhelmingly white and male craft beer industry. In the past month, women and people of color from breweries around the world have been taking to social media to share their experiences of abuse, assault, and harassment. It kicked off here in Boston when Brienne Allen posted about her experience with a group of contractors at Notch Brewing's new tap room in Brighton, just out the road from us, writing, "A man is literally talking to me like a dog right now." She then encouraged other brewers to share their stories, and they did, hundreds of them. The flood of messages has prompted pledges from many breweries in the area to do better and some notable personnel changes. Lord Hobo CEO Dan Lanigan was replaced after he was accused of sexual harassment in several anonymous posts on Instagram. And almost the entire ownership group of Worcester's Wormtown Brewery stepped back from direct involvement in operations there after claims of harassing and discriminatory behavior. My next guests have some insider perspective on how bad the problem is in the craft beer industry and how to change things for the better. I'm joined by Maureen Fabry, the co-owner and head brewer at Milford's CraftRoots Brewing, and Dani Babineau, co-founder and CEO of Redemption Rock Brewing Company. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Maureen, let me start with you. What was your reaction when you saw Brienne Allen take to Instagram to vent and this torrent of other stories follow?
Well, to some extent, I was a bit relieved because I have been a brewer in this industry for 20 plus years. So I don't think that it was news, but I was completely taken aback by the torrent of claims and the rapidity, how quickly they came piling in and how widespread they were, reaching beyond our region and globally. And I think that, again, we are having a bit of a reckoning in an industry that has been working really hard to be inclusive and creative, but I do think that it's time that we take a closer look at what's been really happening.
You and your wife run CraftRoots together, and I'm wondering if that insulates you from the dynamics that we're talking about here, or if this stuff is so pervasive that you manage to bump up against it and have to deal with it anyway.
I think it's probably a lot of the former rather than the latter. I think when Robin and I started CraftRoots, we opened our tap room in 2017. We have been, I think, pretty insulated from rubbing up against some of these types of behaviors and this happening in the industry. But that being said, I've tried to be involved with the Mass Brewers Guild and also involved, in our community. But it is quite a luxury to be able to open your own brewery, open it up with your wife, hire the most diverse pool of candidates that you can come across, and really try to represent yourself in a way that feels whole. And I know that truly is not the case for a vast majority of people in the craft beer industry.
Dani, let me ask you, when we talk, and obviously there's I think a wider range of issues here than we can do full justice to, but when we talk about sexism in particular in the craft beer industry, where do you, in the work that you do now and the work that you've done leading up to here, where have you seen that manifested? Is it from coworkers? Is it from bosses? Is it from customers? Is it all of the above and more things that I didn't even think of?
I mean, I think that there's kind of a difference between my personal experience and what I hear from my colleagues and other women who work in the industry. And just from the fact that I am essentially my own boss and I do have 3 male co-founders. Other than that, though, we've actually never hired any men here, we do a blind hiring process. So it wasn't intentional, but I think it was a result of that process that we've ended up with only women employees. And so we're also kind of feel like we're a little bit insulated just by the way that we run things here. That doesn't mean that we definitely have, I personally experienced instances of sexism within the craft beer community and coming from architecture and construction before that. For us in our tap room, it's mostly coming from customers, whether it's, the kind of social joking or casual sexism and comments just from customers that our staff has to experience. I even, during a presentation that I was making over Zoom earlier this year, was catcalled by a customer while I was trying to make a presentation, which was incredibly ironic because it was actually about this stuff in general. And so that kind of stuff is something that I think as women, we're used to brushing off. Whether it's a casual thing with somebody walking down the street and yelling something at you, that's the stuff that we just almost block out because it is so frequent. But even like our process of getting open, where we had to raise a significant amount of money, and we definitely had a harder time doing that because having a female face of the brewery, whether it was going to meetings, and I stopped bringing my male co-founders to meetings with us because people would direct questions to them that they didn't know how to answer because that wasn't their role in the business. Or, I've talked to men who've opened breweries who it took them a long time to get funded, and they were talking 6 to 8 months, where for us, we were talking 3 years. And having people say that we had an amazing business plan and such an amazing team, but that they couldn't fund us. Or having people question the fact that I wrote my business plan myself, or asking who I hired to write it for me, which is not experiences that other male colleagues I have heard.
I know that you two are both part of the Mass, I want to get the name right, the Mass Brewers Guild, correct? The Diversity and Inclusion Committee. What sort of work is that trade group doing to try to alleviate some of these problems here in Massachusetts?
I would say we're in an interesting position as a trade group because we're trying to focus really on education, providing resources, as well as providing a set of standards for our membership and making sure that we're holding people accountable, but also giving people the resources to be able to hold them accountable to those standards. So everything ranged from, Maureen and I are both on a subcommittee of that group that's been working on a code of ethics for the guild throughout this year, and really being able to focus on making this an organization that every brewery in the state can be proud of being a member for, and realize that it, that stands for something. And that we're also providing resources, whether it's people struggling with human resources and needing to be connected to associate members, or just learning about what kind of human resources they should have in place, because there's such a range of members, from very, very small breweries where people are just doing things on the weekend to Sam Adams and Boston Beer and Harpoon. So you have a huge range of companies that need all sorts of support.
Maureen, as you guys try to push for internal changes, I'm wondering if you get resistance from people who are in leadership positions or positions of power in your industry. And if you do, I'm not asking you to name names, but if there is resistance, how do people push back? Do they say that you're making, a big deal out of stuff that really doesn't matter that much, or what do they say?
I think people sometimes forget that our role is to be transformative, just as humans, but also, in this industry. And so sometimes when we talk about ways we can make improvements, there is that initial resistance that, maybe it's a knee-jerk reaction to some of the things we're proposing, or how are we going to fairly talk about what the process should be to review some allegations, say, amongst our members. And I think those are very valid questions. So I think our role is to listen to those and always remember that we are trying to make some transformative changes, and that when you see the types of conversations that recently have begun, it's more than time for that to happen.
I want to ask you both. We're talking about sexism because I've been focusing on sexism, but I know from before this episode, just from stuff that I've read online, that there's a whole separate but related conversation about race and racism in this industry, with the obvious caveat that you're two white women talking to a white guy. Can you just offer an overview of what the racial dynamics are in craft beer writ large?
Well, I would say that that's a great point, that yes, we don't represent the group that we're going to talk about here, but I think that we are seeing a smaller number of Black-owned businesses, breweries here in the state. It's grown a bit, but there's lots of work that needs to be done. And as Dani referenced with some of the barriers to getting funding, I think, some of the old red line policies, that's still very much having an impact. I also think there's a massive need for people to understand that beer is a very welcoming and a very open and a very accessible beverage. So everyone can enjoy it. Everyone can comprehend it. Everyone can speak and taste, these elegant flavors happening in beer. So it really is something that seems counter to what we're doing to consider race to be any sort of impediment, whether it is to starting a business or owning a business or brewing unique beers or trying beers that they maybe haven't had the opportunity to have in their communities.
Dani, I know that sexism permeates so many facets of our culture, maybe every single facet of it, but I'm wondering if there are things about the craft beer industry, the way it started, the people who tend to be involved in it, the customers who support it, that make the problem different in some way. Whether it's, for example, men seeing a bar as a safe space where they go to be with each other as opposed to with their families. That's just one example. Are there differences when it comes to how it manifests itself in your world, or is it sort of the same problems that you see in other areas, but here as well?
Yeah, I think that differences is the right word. It's not necessarily better or worse than in, tech or any other industry, but it is a little bit different. And I think that it does have to do with kind of the way this industry has grown. That there's automatically a lot of alcohol around. So, and that is often part of your day-to-day job is tasting beer every day. And so not everybody is equipped to handle that responsibly and treat it as the workplace that it is, and kind of end up treating it more like a bar when you're at work because you're working at a bar. So there's these lines that are really blurred. And then you also have a lot of people who've gotten into this industry and started breweries because they are trying to get away from more of a corporate structure. And they're looking at this as a fun thing to do after leaving whatever their previous career was. And they like beer and they like the atmosphere and they like drinking. And so they have a little bit of money or are able to raise some, and they're starting a brewery to be more casual and have fun. But you still need there's certain corporate structures that you still need in place. And this is still a business and it's still a workplace. And so I think a lot of those get left behind because people are trying to leave them behind, whether consciously or subconsciously. So it's an industry that's seen a lot of rapid growth in the last decade or so. So it's very easy to overlook and not prioritize these issues of human resources and diversity and inclusion efforts and really make them a really key part of your business.
I have to give you both a chance to this conversation is making me look forward to a post-work beer. So I want to give you a chance to plug your respective breweries. Maureen, you're in Milford, correct?
That is correct, yes, we're in Milford.
Is there a beer that people should get down there to taste this summer?
Oh, wow. We always have 8 different beers on draft, so it's tough to pick one, but I'd say our Soul Shine New England IPA is tasting really fresh and really juicy right now. It's super popular. Okay,
and Dani, we didn't give your location. Where are you guys located?
We're located in Worcester, so right in the middle of the state, right off 290 on Shrewsbury Street in Worcester, and we're very much taproom focused. So
all right, you've got 10 seconds. What's the beer people should come taste? Pick one.
My one for this summer is 3-Decker, which is our Hellas Lager, but we've got a lot of stuff on as well.
All right, Dani Babineau and Maureen Fabry, thank you both for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.